Hello and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast for movie nerds by movie nerds. As always, I'm Mario Lanza and I will be your host on our journey through the movies out there that just need a little more love. And our movie today is not going to be a difficult one to talk about because this is one of my favorite comedies of all time. It's one of these episodes I've been trying to schedule for weeks and weeks, and it's just, for some reason, it hasn't happened. Like, people had to back out or things got complicated, and I finally get to talk about the 1996 comedy Kingpin starring Woody Harrelson and Bill Murray and Randy Quaid. So very excited about this one. We're going to dive right into it. This is, again, one of those episodes like the Bad News Bears where we're talking about one of my all-time favorite comedies. So get ready for the giggle zone in this one. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about this one. And my co-host today, let's see, this guy, he and I go way back. We've been in fantasy baseball leagues for years. I used to run a thing on Facebook called the Picture Caption Contest, where I'd put a funny picture and people would try to come up with the best caption. And he ended up winning that like 4 or 5 times. He's one of my all-time favorite captioneers that I know. So excited to talk to him. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Dennis Goodman.
Thank you very much. A captioneer, that was a great term. I think I'm going to put that on my LinkedIn profile.
Excellent, yes. Well, welcome to the show, Brother Goodman.
Thank you very much. I have to say, like, when you say talk about movies that need more love, and then you put Kingpin up on Facebook, it kind of surprised me at first because literally within my circle of friends, this is one of our all-time favorites. And I was going back and doing research, and I don't remember this being a box office flop, and I'm just shocked that people don't know this movie. So we're going to have fun talking about this.
Yeah, it's one of those, I agree with you in a sense. It's not really underloved now, but it really was in its context when it came out. And yeah, like you said, this movie was a huge flop. And I'm just giving people a little background on it if they don't know that the Farrelly Brothers are the guys who directed this movie, and they had 3 outstanding comedies right in a row starting in the mid-'90s where they had Dumb and Dumber, and then they had this one, Kingpin, and then they had There's Something About Mary, and widely considered 3 of the funniest movies of the 90s, but one of them, the middle one here, was the one that was the flop. That didn't make any money, and it was not a hit like the other 2, and it's kind of astounding because I think Dennis and I would both agree on this. This is our favorite Farrelly Brothers movie, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think Dumb and Dumber had kind of the Jim Carrey just owning the movie, and then, of course, you had the famous scene with the snowball fight with Jeff Daniels, which just cracks me up. And then everyone loved There's Something About Mary, mainly because of the hair gel scene. And this one just seemed to kind of float under the radar. But to me, and even as I was going back and rewatching it, it's amazing, even 20-some years later, how much I still quote this movie. And I think it's the best of 3. And we'll probably get into some of the reasons why we think it's that way. But yeah, definitely the best of the 3, in my opinion.
And it's funny, this is something I had originally brought up in one of my earlier episodes with Top Secret. Are you familiar with Top Secret?
Oh, very much so.
Okay, yeah, and it's very similar because the Zucker brothers they were the big comedy stars of the 80s, and they had their big 3 movies, just like the Farrelly brothers. They had Airplane and then Top Secret and The Naked Gun. And again, it's the exact same thing where it's that middle one that kind of got left behind, where people kind of forgot about it. And it's like I've always thought Top Secret should be up there in the conversation with Airplane and The Naked Gun, and it never got there. And it's very similar here with the Farrelly Brothers with Kingpin, that I don't know what it is about the second movie where everyone just kind of ignores it and they only remember the first and the third. I just kind of think it's unfair like that.
Yeah, and to this day, I can't have a cold and think of myself as being a little hoarse without thinking of Top Secret. But, the same thing kind of happened with Kevin Smith with Mallrats. I mean, I know that's kind of more of a niche thing, and Kevin Smith has his own thing. But, Clerks was huge, Mallrats flopped, and then Chasing Amy. So maybe, I guess the sophomore slump can extend to movies as well.
Yeah, although you just kind of reminded me of something. I just have a new theory here where you mentioned Jim Carrey, where I think probably what happened is that Dumb and Dumber was not really seen as a Farrelly Brothers movie. It was seen as a Jim Carrey movie.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably what happened. So this is like their second movie, but to most people, unless you were in the know, you really understood who made Dumb and Dumber, you wouldn't really get that this was like just a very similar movie to that one. And so, yeah, without Jim Carrey, without the big draw, this one didn't make as much money, although it's kind of astounding when you look at that in retrospect, when this one had Bill Murray in, this might be blasphemy, arguably what I think may be the greatest Bill Murray role ever.
No, yeah, it's fantastic. and like you said, the Jim Carrey, he owned the first movie, but Dumb and Dumber is just kind of a buddy road flick, and it's about a guy trying to get a suitcase back to somebody, and there's something about Mary, in the Me Too era is kind of a weird, creepy stalker movie, and if you actually get past some of the jokes in Kingpin, which is hard because it's very joke dense. There's actually a story and there's a redemption arc and there's a little bit of heart to it. It's actually a good movie.
Yeah, it's funny those Farrelly Brothers movies, especially the early ones, how they all kind of follow the same template. And that might seem like I'm just saying they're lazy, but it's not. It's just it was such a winning template where it's just there is gross out humor in there, but there's legitimately really funny gags as well. But there's always a heart underneath it, and that was the one thing that Dumb and Dumber, they kind of strayed in that direction. They started with, they went down that road of Lloyd and Harry having the heart, but it wasn't really as prominent a part of the movie as maybe Kingpin, where I think it really works well in Kingpin. In fact, there's one scene in this movie when Roy and Claudia go back to Ocelot that I think is such a fantastic, underrated scene that really gives this movie the heart that maybe the other two didn't have.
Yeah, I agree. And plus it has one of my other favorite quotes in it when she looks at him and says, "What do you think about new beginnings?" And he stops and says, "What is that, the new feminine hygiene spray?" Which is just a funny line. But, there is that little beat there where he stops and asks her, say, "Hey, how do I look?" He's getting ready to go back to his hometown, and she kind of smooths his hair out and says, "Hey, you look real sharp," which is kind of I'm sure we won't be sentimental the entire episode, but it is kind of a good movie that, like you said, underpins the heart of it.
Yeah. Okay. What is your history with this movie? Because I have a long, prominent history with this movie that I want to talk about, but I'm interested in you. You are about my age, plus or minus a couple of years. Like, how old were you when this movie came out? Did you see it in the theater? What was your thought process, or how were you introduced to it?
So 96 was my freshman year of college. I don't think I saw it in the theater. I think it was just one of those that kind of came out on VHS and DVD. And like I say, for some reason, me and my buddies just a movie that stuck with us. And we had a lot of nights just kind of sitting up watching it. And it just became something we quoted a bunch and then would constantly go back to it through the quotes. And, even to this day, we'll see each other and be like, "Hey, how's life?" And, taking forever and all that sort of stuff. And I have a buddy who works for, Philip Morris or whatever their parent company is now. And, every time we see him, we're like, who knows more about smoking than the fine people of the American Tobacco Institute? And they say it's good for you. And just, through all of that, just became a movie that we just watched a ton. And then Something About Mary came out, and obviously that took off. And whenever you have that, popular movie, you kind of go back and catch the other ones. And now, to me, it's just sort of one of those. We had it on DVD, but it's just one of those things where if I just ever see it on, if I'm flipping around the cable box at night, I'll always just kind of stop and watch it.
Okay, here's my backstory on this one. My goes long and deep here because I grew up in bowling alleys, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I know what it's like to spend like every evening in a bowling alley because my dad and my mom were in bowling leagues, and my dad had like a 210, 220 average. He was he could have been a near pro bowler. He was really good. So.
Was that for 10 or 15 frames?
That was the 10 frames. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, my dad was not Amish, although I do have a good Amish story later in this podcast. But yeah, so my dad would go to his bowling leagues and he'd take me and my brother and they'd just drop us off and we'd go play in the arcade. And so that's like 70% of my childhood, just sitting around in bowling alleys waiting for my dad to finish and just watching and then being in bowling leagues of my own. So I know this world very well. One would say maybe a white trashy world, but maybe not so much. I don't know, but it's not really a lifestyle that you see as much today, maybe in the 21st century, but like bowling leagues were a big deal back in the 80s. So many people were in them, and this was my childhood. So when I saw that there was a bowling comedy coming out, I thought, oh, this is going to be fun because they really hadn't been. I mean, is this pre-Big Lebowski or post? It's right around the same time, right?
I think it's a couple years before.
Okay, so this is maybe the first big bowling comedy. And again, I love Dumb and Dumber. Dumb and Dumber came out in 94. And this is a trivia fact that maybe does not speak well of me, but I like saying that Dumb and Dumber is the movie that I've seen the most times in the theater. I saw it 7 times in the theater.
There you go.
So this was the follow-up to Dumb and Dumber, and it came out in 96. and that was the year that I graduated college. That was your freshman year, and it was my senior year. So again, it was 96. I talked about it in my rock podcast. That was the year of all these movies that I was just going to the theater all the time. And Kingpin came out, and I was not all that enthused when I first saw the commercials for it. I'm like, that seems kind of lame. Like, the commercials was just like Woody Harrelson getting hit in the nards by the bowling ball and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, we're doing Dumb and Dumber again, but it's in a bowling alley. I don't think it's going to work. And this is, I'm not sure if you know this, but why this movie kind of got a boost, which critics were very fond of it at the time?
I wouldn't have known it, but I just read an oral history, and the Farrelly Brothers said that what sued them after a sucky opening weekend was Siskel and Ebert's review of it.
Yeah, like Siskel and Ebert have basically said this was like their favorite comedy of like the 90s or something. They just were absolutely so congratulatory and amazed at how funny it was, and that's what eventually won me over. I'm like, well, if a critic likes this comedy and thinks this is like the funniest thing ever, maybe I should give it a chance. And this how my timeline kind of all coalesces into one moment here. In 1996, I happened to be driving across the country with my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time, and we're going across country from California out to visit my brother in New Hampshire. He went to college. And there was a chance, and I was excited that I was going to get a chance to see Kingpin in Amish country in Pennsylvania. Yeah. See, my bucket list is perhaps a little different than other people's, but that was like in my bucket list that I'm going to freaking get to see Kingpin in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, or whatever. So anyway, it didn't happen. My brother and I talked about it. We were in New Hampshire, and we talked about I'm going to go see Kingpin. It's going to be awesome. And for some reason, I'm going through Pennsylvania on the way home, and it's not playing in any of the theaters, which I guess the Amish, bring new releases into their theater half again faster than the English do or something. Right. So I never got to see Kingpin in Amish country, and it haunts me to this day, but I did see it eventually that summer, and I just loved it. And I liked every minute of this movie I loved, and I'm like, I got to go out and tell people about this movie that's so funny. And so that's my history, the Amish/bowling history of Mario Lanza that I am very excited I got to share finally.
Well, maybe the next time you drive cross country, you can find a special, Amish screening, Amish country. Maybe you'll get Witness and Kingpin as a double feature.
Yeah. I have always wondered about that. I mean, Amish, do they ever see movies, period? Like, they have to be aware that there's things called movies, right?
I would hope so.
Perhaps you're not the expert on this subject. I'm not sure.
Maybe, maybe they call them talkies like they did in the 1920s. They don't call them movies yet, but they have a variation.
Okay, let me tell my quick Amish story. This one, I've been saving this up just for this podcast. I have two Amish stories. That's the great thing. So we were in Amish country about 7 years ago with my kids, my wife and my kids, and we went on a horse and buggy ride. Have you ever been to Amish country?
I haven't. There are some Amish communities in Indiana, but even though I grew up in farm country, I am the least handy, least farmish person you'll meet. I like to say I have the hands of a statistician, so no Amish.
Okay. Yeah, so we're in, and once you get out to Amish country, they have all these tourist activities that you can go on, and the big one is the horse and buggy ride, where you get to go with an actual Amish dude, and he takes you around and takes you to the farms and stuff. And it's very exciting. And this is one of my all-time favorite stories, that we were talking to this dude, this actual Amish dude, and we're going on this little horse and buggy ride, and we're talking about foods. And I'm like, what kind of foods do they have out here? And he's explaining like apple butter and church peanut butter and all sorts of stuff. And I was talking about the foods back home in California. And I said, well, we have this great Mexican food. And this guy's eyes lit up, the Amish guy, because he had Mexican food. He'd had it once in his life. So he told us, he said, my wife and I went on a trip to Mexico a couple years ago. We flew down there, which I didn't know they could fly, but he flew. And he said, and we had this food in Mexico, and he's like, oh, brother, it was the most amazing thing. He goes, I've been searching for it ever since. What food, Dennis, do you think he's talking about?
Given the nature of the story, it'd be a really funny punchline if it's something just completely mundane, like a quesadilla or a burrito.
We're going to beat that. He was trying to pronounce it. He was like, a taco? Taco? He's like, it was the most amazing thing, this taco. And he was trying to search for a taco. He couldn't find one in Pennsylvania. So that's my Amish story right there.
If he, got the dessert version, is that the Chaco taco?
Yes. Oh, we didn't get that. You have to take the advanced horse and buggy tour to get to the desserts, the Chaco taco.
Yeah. Hey, What's church peanut butter?
Church peanut butter, I believe, is peanut butter mixed with like marshmallow cream. It's an Amish thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, there you go. I learned something today.
There you go. For all our Amish listeners, I know they're chomping at the bit now, saying, "I could have answered that question. Why didn't I get to come on to the Kingpin podcast?" So.
That's right. Those Quakers.
Oh, those 10-frame bowling Quakers. All right, so here we go. Let's delve into Kingpin here. Let's see. I'm going through my notes here. Anything else you want to talk about before we go into the plot here?
No, I think as you go through the plot, we'll go through. I think one of the, we've talked a lot about the Farrelly Brothers already in their movies, but I think as we go through this, we can talk about, I think, some of the things they really have in all their movies. The athletes in the movie.
Yes.
They have a lot of the character actors who play different parts, and then just soundtracks and really. I rewatched this actually yesterday, and I think there are 6 montages and a couple more, scenes that are just heavily lean on the music. And I kind of remember that the same in Something About Mary as well.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you brought that up because I have that in my notes as well. That's the Farrelly Brothers' big claim to fame, in my opinion. They use music so well in their movies, and it's always like an oldies song or a classic rock song, and they love to use stuff ironically where the music is like completely the opposite of what's happening in the scene. They love to do stuff like that. That's the one thing that I would really like to get across to people before if they don't appreciate this yet. But the soundtrack in these Farrelly Brothers movies, they are so good at picking the right music for the scene.
And they're kind of hit makers a little bit too, because if you remember, the end credits of There's Something About Mary, they just kind of had the everyone dancing to Build Me Up Buttercup, and I think that brought that song back to be a hit again.
Yeah, and in this one we get Blues Traveler for some reason out in the Amish countryside.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I think John Popper from Blues Traveler makes 2 appearances in this movie.
I believe he sings. Oh no, he doesn't sing the national anthem. He's the MC of the bowling event.
Exactly, because when I think Amish bowling comedy, I think John Popper.
It was the skinny version of John Popper, though.
Oh, that was the skinny one?
I think so.
He's been eating too many tacos.
Oh, goodness.
All right, so here we go. So it'll be Brother Goodman and I will be walking through the plot here of the movie Kingpin, which, again, one of my favorite comedies, one of, I think, the funniest movies ever made. And I will flat out say it. I think this movie has 2 of the greatest supporting characters in any comedy ever. And we're going to talk about, obviously, Bill Murray. We'll probably spend at least 30 minutes on Bill Murray at some point. But then Lynn Shay as the gross old landlady.
Yeah, and it's just amazing. I mean, I don't even know where to. I guess I was reading a story, like when she showed up to audition for that part, they thought it was legitimately a homeless person. And then they wound up giving her the part, and then just the way that, she kind of, I don't know, the way she delivers her lines and goes between being sort of the, the meek woman when she's getting robbed to being kind of the hard ass to wanting her money, and then obviously the gross out scene where you see her, the homage to The Graduate, where she has her leg up with all the varicose veins, and Woody Harrelson doing some very realistic vomiting in that scene.
Yeah, again, for people who haven't seen it, there's one character in this movie, she's this gross old landlady, and through a series of unfortunate events, Woody Harrelson must have sex with her to pay his rent, and she's the nastiest character in a movie ever, and she steals every scene she's in, and I just remember laughing so hard at those scenes the first time I saw them, and then that's the funny thing is that's Lynn Shay, like she's not even like a full-time actress, right?
No, I don't think so. She was in Dumb and Dumber, and apparently she knew some bigwig at the studio, said, hey, give this person a shot to be in the movie, and got in the first movie, then she found her way in the second movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even that she knew somebody. She is the sister. I think the guy's Robert Shay, the guy that runs New Line Cinema. And he just told them, the Dumb and Dumber guys, could you put my sister in a movie? She likes to act. So they put her in Dumb and Dumber as Mrs. Nugaborn. And then she showed up in this one, and she absolutely steals the show as the landlady. And then she shows up again in Something About Mary as Magda, who's just about as nasty as this one. So she's made quite a career playing nasty middle-aged women.
Yeah, and when you talk about stealing scenes, she might have stolen the movie with. If people have just seen this once, I think the line that sticks with them the most is, I don't know what it is about good sex that makes me have to crap. Like, Roy, you really shook something loose. Like, I hear that a lot.
I'm a comedy writer at heart, and that right there, when they're writing this movie, they know that's the line that the audience is going to remember. What is it about good sex that makes me have to crap? You literally jarred something loose, Tiger. And have you seen the director's cut? There's an extra line in there in the director's cut version.
Is that the one where she goes, hump dump, or pump dump?
She says too much pumping and dumping. She goes pump and dump.
Well, I tell you, and we're kind of skipping around. I'll let you get to the story back in a minute. But even the scene where she gets robbed, like the way she acts that just kills me, because the guy is. So Woody Harrelson sets up a fake robbery to try to avoid paying rent. And the guy who's stealing the bag from her says, "Give me the bag." And she goes, "No." He goes, "Give me the bag." She goes, "No." And finally he goes, "Come on, lady, give me the bag." And she goes, "Okay." And just gives it to him. And the way she just says, "Okay," on the third time after resisting the first two just kills me, because it's just the way she plays it.
Yeah, just, again, Lynn Shay, one of these people who wasn't even a full-time actress. They just threw her into their movies as a favor to their buddy, and she ended up stealing all their movies. Okay, let's not beat around the bush too far. We've already spent 20 minutes just dicking around here. Okay, so Kingpin is the story of a young man in a city called Ocelot, or a town called Ocelot, Iowa. His name is Roy Munson, and he is just we open the movie, it's this little Americana scene, and they have Cat Stevens playing Oh Very Young. It's a really nice scene of this little boy and his dad. The dad owns a gas station. His name is something Munson, and his little boy Roy is there. And it starts with Roy and his dad talking about, he's like, "Hey, Dad, hey, you want to have a game of ball or something like that?" And Dad's like, "Okay, sure, go get your ball." And you think it's going to be baseball, but it's not. They have like a little makeshift bowling alley they've set up on the side. And so ostensibly, Roy just goes and plays bowling with his dad every day, and it's like this really heartfelt moment. Nice little, like the start of any good sports movie, the dad and the son.
Very much so. And then they've got a few things that are, really on the nose for what you'll see later. He bowls the ball and says, "Oh, you put that in a bottle, it's sweeter than Yoo-hoo," which comes up again. And then he'll say, "If you apply everything I've ever taught you to your real life, you'll be a great person." But, right there, that's, just setting him up for failure. And then the line that comes back the most is, "Son, one day people are going to use the name Munson in bowling as they think about DiMaggio in baseball," which turns out to be a very false fact later in the movie.
Yes. One day when people say the name Munson, they're going to think winner. Yeah, that's where the movie's going to go here, that Roy Munson will be the biggest loser in the history of sports ever, to the point that eventually people will start throwing around his name. "I don't want to get Munsoned." Like, it means that they fucked up their lives and they threw away everything. So there's a line here the dad has right at the start, and it's not even the funniest line. I just love the way the Farrelly Brothers write dialogue, where the dad says to the son, I got it written exactly here. He's like, "You got a great gift. It's as if angels came down from heaven and put a blessing on your 3 bowling digits." It's such a stilted way to say that.
Which, again, when we get to Amish country, you'll get kind of a continuation of that joke when he talks to Ish and says, "God bless you too, but it's round, has 3 holes, and you put your fingers in it." He's like, "You keep Miss Rebecca out of this."
Okay, so Roy Munson is this perfect little specimen of a Midwest child. He's just little Americana setting, and the dad is so proud of him, and Roy grows up, and he becomes a big bowling champion, and we get this great intro shot at the start of the movie where the opening credits are rolling, where he walks into like a bowling alley, and they're playing Disco Inferno, and he's such a big celebrity now because he's like the amateur champion of the state of Iowa. He's a big bowling legend, and it's all, it's Woody Harrelson, got these bell bottoms on, playing in the 70s and stuff. And as he's walking into the bowling alley, he just walks by and grabs somebody's pizza off their plate. And because he's such a big star, he's allowed to do that. And they just cheer him, and then he's bowling and putting on a show, and you see his dad in the background being all proud. Like, "This is my son. Roy Munson is a winner."
And then they've got the send-off scene after he, comes home being state champion, where he gets, they show him going professional, and his, very touching moment where the dad gives him the watch and, says, "Hey, I can't get this to work. It's a gold pocket watch. Can't get this to work, but if you ever need to pawn it for some bucks, you can have it," and then sends him on his way, which kind of surprised me when I watched it again this week. So what was Munson's dad's job? Do you remember?
He owned a service station, right?
So a guy who owns a service station can't get a pocket watch to work, especially when we figure out what has to happen for it to work.
Well, the Munsons aren't known for being winners, Dennis.
I was just watching that the other day, and I'm like, the guy was working on cars. He can't wind a watch. What's going on here?
I never thought about that, but yeah. The otherwise perfect father, the angelic Mr. Munson, was too stupid to figure out how to wind a watch.
That's right.
Okay, yeah, so Roy Munson is the state champion of Iowa, and they even have a sign in Ocelot saying, home of Roy Munson, amateur bowling champion. And you think this is going to be this, heroic trajectory of this noble figure, which is hilarious if you know where this movie is going to go.
And he, for winning the state championship, he wins a solid gold ring, which is also the source of many jokes for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it's. I'm going to say it now because I may forget. But one of the great running gags in this movie, and I'll spoil it for people, but Woody ends up with a rubber hand. He's got a rubber hand, and he's got his state champion bowling ring on it. And every time he shows the ring to somebody, and he says, "What do you think of this?" They always comment on the hand. Mm-hmm. And whenever he shows someone a hand and asks to comment on that, they always comment on the ring.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite little running gags in a 90s comedy, that they always will misinterpret what he's asking.
That's right.
Okay, so Roy leaves Ocelot. He has this big old send-off from that PJ's Soft Serve is like the local hangout, and all his friends wish him well. And again, this will be like The Natural, like Roy Hobbs. He's going out into the big world. He's representing the Midwest. And the first scene we see is where it's his first professional bowling matchup, and we see him in a showdown with who will later be his arch rival, Bill Murray, as Big Ern Ernie McCracken.
Gotta love Big Ern. I was in a charity bowling event, and we had to name our team, and so I called us Big Ern's All Stars. Mm-hmm. And all the folks, I manage a team of analysts who are all at least 10, 15 years younger than me. They're all like, Big Ern, what does that mean? And my heart broke a little bit that day. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's terrible. Even to this day, but like I said, I grew up in bowling alleys. I still go bowling all the time. And when you put your name in on the screen there, and it pops up on the overhead display who's bowling, I'm always either Roy Munson or Big Ern, Ernie McCracken. And again, it breaks my heart because I don't see anybody else do that. So, again, just my bucket list may be different than other people's bucket lists. We'll just say that.
But I think, we get kind of the first sense of Bill Murray. In his first scene, he's like doing the thing where he's acting like you first think that he's a TV announcer. Mm-hmm. Because he's, setting up his shot. Roy has a shot to beat him in this tournament, and he's like, take it from me. Right now, your bladder feels like a overfilled vacuum bag, or I forget the exact quote, but he's talking, and he's in that voice, so you think he's an announcer, and then all of a sudden, Roy turns around and looks, hey, I wasn't talking when you were bowling.
Yeah,
it's just a great setup to the character.
Yeah, the exact line that I have written down here where Bill Murray is commenting on Roy as he's about to bowl. And again, anybody who bowls know this is a faux pas. You don't talk when somebody else is going through their backswing. And Bill Murray will just repeatedly just talk all through Woody's bowling. And the line is, about this time you realize your butt is kind of like an about to explode bratwurst. Woody's like, excuse me, I wasn't talking when you were bowling. And so Bill's like, oh, I'm sorry, was I saying that out loud? Sorry. And then there's a great dick move where Woody's just about to bowl, and then Bill Murray says, good luck, like right at the last second.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to talk about this, the legend of Bill Murray. I talked about this in my Meatballs podcast, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but I'm not sure my listeners will be aware of this, that Bill Murray does not do movie scripts. I'm not sure if people are aware of why he is such a legend, because they'll give Bill Murray a script, and he just looks at it, and he'll be like, nah. And he just makes up dialogue. Almost every line he does in a movie, especially in his later years, is just him improvising. And that's the thing in Kingpin. Every single line he does here is this asshole villain, Ernie McCracken. He's just making up on the spot. And the Farrelly Brothers would say anything he does is funnier than the script. So, we didn't mind at all because it was just amazing watching him work. So, again, why I keep repeating this every time we do a Bill Murray movie, that's the legend of Bill Murray, that he absolutely steals every single scene he's in this movie, and every single line he gives is improvised.
And it's funny because in some of the scenes, I think you can really tell he's improvising. Like there's a scene in the diner where he asked Woody Harrelson to leave.
Yeah. And
there's this table of people who obviously are extras. And so he looks at him, and, Big Ern's obviously a womanizer, if you've seen the movie. And he looks at this table of women, and he goes like, hey. And this older woman is sitting next to a younger daughter, or maybe another extra, and she goes, "Hey," and her face like lights up, like, "Holy cow, Bill Murray's talking to me." And then he stops and he goes, "Not you. You, hey, how you doing?" Talks to the daughter. It's just such a perfect Big Earn moment, but you can tell that those women weren't ready for him to talk to them at all.
Yeah, it's amazing because you can tell they're not even in focus in the shot. They're just kind of off to the side. And Bill Murray's just flirting and being a dick to the extras. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's the scene. So that is going to be the big story of this movie, that Roy Munson, this little farm boy, and this streetwise hustler asshole Ernie McCracken, and their first matchup, Roy Munson wins in the tournament. He knocks off Big Earn, the bowling legend, and Big Earn gets mad about it because you don't beat him. He's too good, and he ends up putting sugar in Roy Munson's gas tank, and so Roy Munson breaks down, trying to drive to the next tournament, and somehow they end up at this diner together because Woody's car has broken down.
Yep.
And this is the scene that you were talking about. One of my top 10 favorite scenes in this movie, where it's just them sitting at a coffee shop diner talking about their lives.
Right.
Because it's Bill Murray is completely improvising this, where he's talking about we should work together and we can go around from town to town and get some supplemental income. And it's funny watching Woody Harrelson just react to Bill Murray. He just repeats whatever Bill Murray says, but like with his mouth full of food. He's like, supplemental income?
He's like dripping the food out.
So Bill Murray's like, yeah, supplemental income. You interested? And yeah, Woody's like, interested? Bill's like, money. Would you like some extra income? And Woody's like, extra income?
And then he finally just says, okay, you eat the rest of that outside.
I don't know how they got through that scene and not laugh, because I that whole scene just smacks of it's being improvised. And Woody I've long said is one of my most underrated comic actors out there, but it's funny watching him just go toe to toe with Bill Murray in this and hold his own. It's amazing.
It really is. I don't know, the whole scene just cracks me up. I mean, I can't really add much to what you said on it. I guess to give more context on the scene for people who haven't seen it, this is basically, as you said, the natural's gone off. He's trying to make his way. He's already running into problems, and now he's trying to, he's struggling and trying to figure out how he's going to stay on the tour. And it's really one of those scenes where, Bill Murray's trying to bring him to the dark side a little bit, but he can't actually, tell him that he needs to cheat or get extra money or whatever. So he's just trying to lead him there. But Woody Harrelson isn't really paying attention and kind of figuring out what he's trying to do. So to watch him go through those machinations is pretty funny.
So if this were The Natural, does that mean that Bill Murray is Memo Paris?
It's been a while since I've seen The Natural. So is that the one that shoots him?
Yeah, that's Kim Basinger, the one that tempts Roy Hobbs right off the bat and ruins his innocence.
There you go. Winds up shooting him.
Yes, this the first time that Bill Murray has ever been compared to Kim Basinger. Yeah, so they end up teaming up because this streetwise Big Earn, and he basically convinces Woody that we have to go around and hustle people to make some extra income. That's what bowlers need to do to live. And their very first hustle could not go more wrong.
Yeah. Well, there's even before they get to the hustle, there's the great scene in the stairs leading up there, where Woody's like, "Hey, not sure if we should do this," and Big Earn's like, "It takes guts, kid, to call home and say that you can't make it. Let's get out of here so you can make that call before your parents get to bed." And then Woody's like, "All right, I'll do it." I just love Bill Murray just under his breath, like, "Nice flip flop," as he walks back up the stairs.
It's funny how many times I've used that quote myself over the years, and I didn't even realize that I say it so many times where my kids want to do something, they change their mind, and I'll just in the manner of Bill Murray say, "Yeah, nice flip flop."
Yeah.
So, and again, this whole scene feels like it's improvised. Just Bill Murray. Oh wow, yeah. You don't want to hustle. Let's go call your mommy and daddy. You better catch them before they go to bed. So they go up there and they have this scam where Bill Murray and Woody Harrelson are like dictionary salesmen, and they're pretending they're drunk, and they play games for money, and they basically try to hustle whoever's in the alley at the time. And they end up in this match with this priest. He's like a priest and a bunch of thugs, and Woody ends up, Woody pretends he's drunk, he pretends he doesn't know how to bowl, and he gets this, what's the split, like a 6-7-10 split in the last frame, and he says, if I pick that up, then I win double or nothing, I win all your money, and he basically cons them, and he hits the shot because he's Roy Munson, bowling legend, and the bad guys are like, how did he do that? What's the line? The guy says, "Come on, boy, roll," and Roy's like,
"Name's not Boy, it's Roy."
Roy Munson. Yeah. This is the last time in the movie that name will be used for good, by the way.
Yeah, and can we talk about how great the priest is? Because the priest comes up, he's sitting there getting ready to bowl, and a woman comes up with a drink, and he's like, gambling on bowling's my only vice. As he takes the drink and then smacks the waitress on the ass as she walks away. He looks at Bill Murray. He's like, okay, two. And Murray's like, that's still very good.
Yeah, that's 100% an ad lib from Bill Murray right there. Now, two vices. That's still very good. And then Murray's got another line in the scene earlier that I know is ad libbed. I know the Farrelly Brothers have talked about this as their favorite Bill Murray ad lib in the movie, where he's trying to convince Roy Munson not to bet his dictionary money. And he's like, what's he say? Why would you want to do this? You're on a gravy train with biscuit wheels. And the Farrelly Brothers are like, where did he come up with that? Where did he get that line?
That's so awesome. And then also, this movie has a lot of wraparound jokes. And, so the split comes up and he says he can pick it up and they go double or nothing. And Bill Murray's like, well, not for double or nothing. We're going to put all this money down there. He's like, you're going to hit the 6, 7, 10 the minute I start losing my hair. Because when you see Big Earn in the beginning of the movie, he's got this great afro. And then when when time skips ahead and you see him the next time, he's got a very obvious Gene Katie comb over, which people who aren't from Indiana won't get that.
I have a lot of Indiana listeners, so that one should go over well.
There you go. He was the Purdue basketball coach who had a hideous comb over. But I just love that line. It's like, I'll lose my hair if you make that.
Yeah, so Woody and Bill Murray hustle these thugs in Pennsylvania at some no-name bowling alley, and they get caught. The other guys, they come out to the parking lot afterwards, and they smash the car. The locals are like, how dare you con us? I knew Roy Munson. You said that name. I recognized it. You're a bowling champion. So they've been caught hustling, and this is where all the conflict in the movie is going to happen, where Bill Murray tells Woody, he's like, well, sometimes you get caught hustling and a bowler has to go out and face the music. So Roy Munson comes out of the car to go face the bad guys, and Ernie's like, and that bowler that's going to face the music is you. And he drives off and leaves poor Roy Munson. And to say this doesn't end well is an understatement, is that basically the thugs will take Roy Munson, insert his hand into the ball return, and chop it off basically like a wood chipper. And that is the end of Roy Munson's right hand and his bowling career. He is now a one-handed has-been.
And by the way, the guy who cranks on the machine to turn up to high power, he has this look of near sexual glee at the injury that's going to happen to Roy Munson. It's the only one that's close is the guy in The Princess Bride who almost gets off when Wesley is on the torture machine. But the look on his face as he flips that machine, knowing that they're going to take his hand off, it's just creepy. It gives me nightmares. And
that's one of the Farrelly Brothers regulars, that actor, if I recall. He's in all of their movies.
I think he's in a wheelchair, and he's the one in There's Something About Mary that basically watches Ben Stiller move these huge pieces of furniture and is yelling at him to go faster.
Yeah, and I think he's in Dumb and Dumber. He's one of the guys outside Lloyd and Harry's apartment. They have a couple guys that just hang out there. I think so. That's one of the things Dennis mentioned earlier in this podcast, that the Farrelly Brothers use the same actors in all their movies. They have all these stable of all their friends and stuff that they rotate through the movies. So yeah, so Roy Munson gets his hand chopped off, and we have one of the greatest Farrelly Brothers scenes here where Woody's getting his hand shredded in the ball return, and we immediately cut to a wood chipper.
Yeah. Was that pre-Fargo?
This was 96, so it was 2 years after Fargo.
Okay.
Yeah. So the wood chipper trope had been established by now.
That's right.
Okay, so now we flash forward. Now it's 17 years later in the future, and all of Roy Munson's future has been dashed. He's now a has-been. He's lost his hand, and we get this wonderful montage. Like you said, there's 6 montages in this movie. This is the first one of what Roy Munson's life is like now. And again, the music is what really makes this scene as they play It's a Beautiful Morning.
Yeah.
Why don't you explain to people what Woody's reality is now, what Roy Munson's reality is now?
Well, the scene after the wood chipper, the music plays and you hear an alarm, and the alarm goes off 2 or 3 times, and then it's turned off by a hook going through it. And then you see Woody's right hand has been replaced by a hook, and shows him getting up and leaving to go to a bowling alley where I think he manages to rip out the sleeve of his coat with the hook. He breaks the rearview mirror. As he leaves the apartment, he goes through or goes past two guys that are just sitting there who are two of the great lackeys in movie history. Some of my favorite lines. He asked the guy, "How's it going?" or "How's life?" And he goes, "Taken forever." And he's breathing oxygen. And then I think one of the other guys looks at him and goes, "Hey, Roy, can you get sick drinking piss?" Roy goes, "I think so." He's like, "Even if it's your own?"
Too bad I don't have a doctor on the show that can back that one up. I'm not sure what the research is on drinking your own piss.
So they basically show him getting in the car, and he's driving off to a bowling alley to see that this once great champion is now reduced to being a bowling alley supply salesman.
Yeah.
Going around trying to sell things like novelty condoms and Lane oil to small bowling alleys who are basically just as annoyed that he's there, that he's annoyed that he has to be there.
Yeah, this is Roy Munson's reality. He's a one-handed, fat, bald guy that sells condoms for novelty machines in the men's room.
Yeah, and he's doing a lot of drinking. You see a lot of empty bottles around his apartment. The first thing he does after he breaks his alarm clock with the hook is takes a big swig of Jim Beam, I believe. Which always, I'm like, it's 17 years later, you're still breaking stuff with a hook? I mean, the learning curve on those things must be pretty bad.
Yeah, well, again, keep in mind who his father was and his father's mechanical reasoning skills. Maybe Woody in 17 years has still not figured out the hook.
Right. And he gets into this car, which is about 3 different tones with different parts and doesn't work. And it's, he's down on his luck a bit.
Yeah. So Woody is wandering around basically just selling novelty items to bowling alleys around Pennsylvania, and one day he's in this alley and he just happens to hear out of the corner of his hearing behind him somebody bowls an amazing ball and it hits the pins with all this force, and he kind of turns around because he's like, he used to be a bowling legend, he knows that sound. And this is where we meet one of the other major characters in this movie, Ishmael, who is in only the Farrelly Brothers universe would we have an Amish bowling prodigy. Yeah, Woody walks up to him and has a line here, which is a wonderfully dirty line if you take it out of context, which I've always loved. He says, "You stroke a hell of a ball, but I bet when you're off, you leave a lot of buckets."
And by the way, I just love that whole thing, and this isn't even a comedy thing, but I know you and I are big baseball guys, and the little nuance of him just hearing it the first time, because if you hang around a ballpark long enough, mm-hmm. and you have these complexes where there's like 8 or 10 fields, or you're at a major league game and you're maybe distracted, a well-struck baseball is one of the greatest sounds in the world. So people are like, "Oh, how can you tell that from hearing?" I'm like, you know what? In sports, sometimes you actually can tell the difference between a good and a bad player just by the sounds that it makes. I always kind of like that detail.
Yeah, no, that again, this is a sports movie deep down, and it will become much more of a sports movie towards the end. But yeah, like you said, the little details are there that you can hear the difference, and you've played baseball, obviously. It's even hitting the ball. Like if you hit a ball perfectly, you don't even feel it. It's as if you never even touched the ball.
Yeah, I remember the one time that happened in my life. Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so anyway, Roy Munson goes over to Ishmael and says, "Wow, you're an amazing bowler. Like, what's your average?" And Ishmael's like, "Oh, I don't know, 265, 270. And for people who don't know, a perfect game in bowling is 300. So if you're bowling a 265 or 270 average, that would rank you one of the top bowlers in the world if you're almost perfect every single time." So Roy's ears perk up. He's like, "Oh my God, you bowl that high?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, see you later, I gotta go home." And so Roy is very intrigued by this bowling guy who bowls a near perfect game every time. And so he finds out this guy's Amish, and Roy tracks him down. He's like, "How would you like me to manage you? I'm a bowling manager with my expertise. I could train you and we could make all this money." And this is all Roy has going for him at this point in his life, that all he can offer is his expertise. So he offers Ishmael a position as a trainee, and Ishmael says, "No, I can't do it." And Roy, in typical Roy Munson winner fashion, says, "You suck, you loser, you fucking Amish don't deserve a car." So it doesn't end well.
And I love, even from the beginning, how they basically set, Ishmael up as just a big man-child.
Yeah.
Like, he basically is like a kid. So the bike that he's riding back, is obviously it's a bike, has one of those great big baskets on the front that you have when you're 8.
Yeah.
And then when Roy tells him that he sucks, you can hear him ring the little bell. They're like, ring, 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 as he's going back off.
Okay, and now a little bit of trivia here. You may know the answer to this, but I bet not everybody does. Who was that role Ishmael Borg written for? Who was the first choice to play Amish bowling prodigy man-child?
I'm glad you brought that up because I read it was actually Chris Farley.
Yes, and he would have been perfect. That is the perfect role that Chris Farley could have played, this little man-child, idiot man-child, and it will always haunt me that this movie, that we did not get Chris Farley in this movie because I think he was committed to Black Sheep or something at the time. He couldn't do this one. But I do think this is the movie that would forever have cemented him as comedy legend.
That's interesting. Since I read that, I've been thinking about this more and more, and I think the thing I love about Randy Quaid in this movie is that he plays someone who's older but still has the sensibilities of a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I worry that if Farley would have played it, he would have played it like an old man acting like a kid. And I know that seems very different, just almost like a stupid adult or something instead of someone who wasn't really seasoned in the world. I think it would have been really, really interesting. I think it would have been a lot different, I think. And maybe just my recency bias, and I've seen this movie 20 times with Randy Quaid in there. I don't know. I can't project Farley, and I've just seen Randy Quaid in there too much.
Yeah, see, to me, I've always thought that Randy Quaid's probably the weakest part of this movie. And maybe that's such a bad thing because everyone else is so good in it. But I do remember, Bill Simmons, right?
Oh, yeah.
I remember when this movie came out, and Bill Simmons was a big fan of it. And he said, what I love Kingpin, and he specifically pointed out Randy Quaid. He's like, Randy Quaid was funny. Like, he's good in that role, but like Amish bowling prodigy, you should knock that role out of the park. Like, that should be the funniest thing ever, and he's not the funniest guy in this movie. It's really, Woody and Bill Murray carrying it. Bill Simmons said, what I would have loved to see was Will Ferrell in his prime playing Ishmael. He goes, that would have made this the funniest movie ever because that was back in Will Ferrell's prime when he could play anything and he was like the funniest guy on SNL at the time. So that's the one thing I always think of when I watch this movie. I'm reminded that Bill Simmons pointed out that Randy Quaid's good, but that should be a legendary comic character right there.
Yeah, I think the way he plays it and the decisions he makes are good. I think the thing that hurts him is I'm not sure if they ever say how old he's supposed to be. Like they refer to him as Ish. And the Vanessa Angel character calls him a kid all the time. But in real life, he's 11 years older than Woody Harrelson and 16 years older than the woman who plays Claudia. And then even later when he leaves them for a while and they go into a strip joint to find him, which we might talk about later. It's the greatest name of a fictional strip joint ever. Woody Harrelson's character says, yeah, we're looking for an Amish guy, early 40s. And I never knew if he just blew that line or if Ishmael was really supposed to be 40.
Well, remember that Amish people age again half as much as we do as the English. Yeah, no, I've always wondered that too because they keep calling him boy like he's 16. But Randy Quaid, for people who know him, he was on Saturday Night Live as the old guy 10 years before this movie.
Yeah, and then I actually looked this up before we got on here. Randy Quaid and Bill Murray were born 10 days apart in 1950. So, I mean, he's an old dude, and he was old when this came out. So,
yeah, but just one of the what ifs. What if Chris Farley had played this role? What if they had gotten someone like Will Ferrell? Yeah, Randy Quaid, I mean, he does fine in this movie, but I've always thought they could have picked someone maybe a little stronger. But again, we got a lot to get through. Let's move on here.
Right.
Okay, so Woody, Roy Munson's attempt to manage Ishmael has failed, and he goes back to his loser life in his loser apartment. And we're about to get the scene, the one that made me laugh so hard when I saw it the first time in the theater. All right, so I'll build you up to it here. So Woody goes back to his apartment, and his landlady's there. And Woody can't pay his rent. He's got this gross old, greasy, chain-smoking landlady. Looks like she's never taken a shower. And she's always on his case to pay the rent, and he can't pay it because he's a loser and he's poor. And so he's developed this scam where he's got a friend that will come and try to rob the landlady, and Woody throws coffee in this guy's face, and the guy runs off, and the landlady is all happy. She's like, oh, you saved me. You're such a hero, Roy. Oh, I can't believe you. And Roy's like, oh, don't worry about it. And she's like, and that rent, oh, just whenever you can pay it, that's good. So this is the scam that he's worked out. And so it's apparently been working up until now, and then we get a scene here where the landlady comes back into Munson's apartment, and she sees him with the robber that theoretically he just scared off to run down the street. Turns out the Woody and the robber were in cahoots, and she catches them, and she's furious. And then the landlady has a little temper tantrum, and then this is the scene. Again, I almost can't get through this without laughing, where she says, you're out of here. I'm going to call the police. You're done, Munson. And he's like, Is there anything I can do? Please, I have to stay here. Is there anything that I can do to pay the rent, to make up for the rent and stay here? And she gets this little look on her face. And immediately, Dennis, what do we cut to?
We cut to the Simon and Garfunkel song, Hello Darkness, My Old Friend. And the scene pulls out, and you see her lying in bed with a cigarette in her mouth, sheet pulled up to her shoulders, and Roy just vomiting very, again, I don't know how they did it, but very chunky, great-looking fake vomit into the toilet.
Yes.
So obviously Roy has had to do terrible, terrible things to pay the rent.
Yeah, and you think he's just slept with her, but no, there will be other terrible things that she's going to imply that he's been doing as well.
Yeah. And that's where she says, what is it about great sex that makes me have to take a crap? And he pukes again. And then after you see him puke, they cut to the scene of basically it's a shot through her legs, very similar to The Graduate, which is interesting because The Sound of Silence was used in the movie The Graduate as well. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of get the event that drives the second act where she says, you still owe me another month's rent, so you better quit this bowling thing, and throws the bowling magazine at him. And on the cover, it says $1 million winner take all Reno Open. And then she proceeds to do this is where you need a visual podcast with the.
Yes. I believe that is the international sign of cunnilingus. Yes, so she basically says that not only has Roy slept with her, but he is now required to do oral sex on her as well. And being that she's probably covered with flies down there and feels like Vaseline, it's not a pleasant scene. And again, it's one of the more disturbing scenes you're going to see in a comedy. But I just have to say that cut between anything I can do, anything, and then we cut right to her laying satisfied in bed after getting banged, is one of the greatest comedy moments of the 90s. And so Roy has had to do some horrible things here, and now the threat of doing even more of that involving cunnilingus is now in play, and now he's horrified. He's like, I got to get some money. I'm not going to live this life. And yeah, so he sees.
And I love it when one of the great subtle lines is, as she walks in to reward him for being valiant, her line is, Roy, I know how you like to drink. And she's got like this great big thing of booze, but it's like of all the characteristics of Roy Munson that you can do, it's like, hey, I know you like to drink, so here's a gift.
Yes. So again, just one of the great moments in the 90s, one of this scene right here. And so this drives the second act where Roy has to go get Ishmael. He's like, there's this tournament coming up in Reno. I have to get this kid. I got to train him. So he drives out to Amish country again. And this is where in the brainchild of Roy Munson, how he's going to do this, he's going to pass as an Amish person himself. He's a Brother Hezekiah Munson.
With the Irish accent.
Yeah. He's got an Irish accent because that's what he thinks the Amish people sound like. Hey, top of the morning to you.
And it's so great because when he shows up first at the house, the Amish mom obviously knows he's full of shit, but she just she can't turn anyone away, probably because it's in their religion or something, and lets him into the house anyway.
Hey, there any shingling or butter churning need doing? Yeah, that's one of the best understated jokes in this movie, that he thinks the Amish people are Irish. I'll find you Lucky Charms.
It's not even a good Irish accent. It's so bad. And then there's the scene where he's sitting down and they say, how many kids do you have? And he says, none that I know of. And he catches himself saying it normal. So then he flips back to the Irish accent and says he was a nasty cheese grating accident when he was a wee boy.
Yes. Back when I was plunging and scrubbing and far and away with Tom Cruise.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I really hope that Irish accent was passable. That's the best I can do. My wife loves Far and Away, so I know that movie like the back of my hand.
I can't do British accents. I ever try to do a British accent, and I sound like a cheap version of Apu from The Simpsons, so I don't even try.
All right, so Ish pulls Munson aside. He's like, "Why are you here? They're gonna find out you're a fraud." And Munson's like, "Well, I gotta get you on this bowling tour. That's the thing. This is your destiny. We need this money." And really, he just needs it for himself. But what will happen is, in the convenient plot twist, the Ishmael's farm will need the money. So eventually, he's going to convince Ishmael to come. But there is a couple great scenes here, a couple of lines of dialogue anyway, where this is where Ishmael explains how the Amish are different than the English, how everything that you English do, we do what you do, and then half again just as much. I mean, over the top, just to point out that we have to work harder than you English. That's just how we survive, and this will come into play later when we find out that that Ishmael's bowling average is perhaps a little inflated. All right, so here we go to another montage in the movie, the Amish working montage, where Munson is trying to pass himself off as an Amish person to win over Ishmael's trust. And a couple great gags in this one, and I'll spill my favorite one where just some really filthy, dirty jokes in this movie that they don't spell out how dirty they are. You kind of have to get it to realize what they're talking about. But the one about the bull, this is the one that absolutely killed me when I saw it the first time in the theater, where Roy Munson wakes up early to do the Amish chores to kind of help out and to prove his worth, and he goes out and he decides he's going to milk the cow. So he walks up to the other Amish people, and he's got a big bucket full of milk and a big mustache as if he's been drinking it. And he's like, I was out there, I got up early and I was milking your cow. And he's like, she sure is a stubborn one. I just keep working and working and working and nothing comes out. And then bam, all at once it all comes out. She sure is a gusher. And he's drinking the milk, and the lead Amish guy's like, we don't have a cow, we have a bull.
And if you listen closely, right after he says we have a bull, and they go back to Munson before he says anything, there's a sound in the background. That's just perfectly inserted.
So Munson's drinking a bucket of what probably is not milk, perhaps is something else, something creamier. And I always love that Woody Harrelson sells the joke by just before the scene ends, he's kind of staring there and he's like, I'm going to go brush my teeth.
The thing that sells it from the beginning is he's just so happy. He's just bouncing up there. The milk is just, it's overflowing and bouncing around. He's got the milk mustache, and he's just so proud of himself.
Yeah. So again, just all this montage of him doing chores and failing, and then this is where we get the scene that you had mentioned earlier, where he's talking about, it's your future, Ishmael. It's round and it's got 3 holes, and you stick your fingers in it. And Ishmael's like, you leave Miss Rebecca out of this.
Which is again, they treat Ishmael like a kid, and even in that montage, he wants to, build with the men, and they make him go off and play with the children. And then all of a sudden he drops that joke. And it's like, okay, that's an interesting thing for a pseudo kid to come up with. But I guess if you're a farm kid, you've seen, plenty of things that city kids haven't seen.
Well, the Amish marry young, I've heard, so.
Yeah, that's fair.
They eat tacos and they marry young. Okay, so Munson is just failing at every chore on the farm. At some point he saws off their horse's hooves. He's trying to reshoe this giant horse, and he thinks that means sawing off the hooves. So the horse gets much shorter. It's a fun little visual gag. But eventually, I'm just going to fast forward here. What happens is, it turns out the Amish farm here is in debt, $500,000 to the bank, and the bank wants to foreclose. So if only we had a savior who could save us and give us $500,000, which conveniently enough is half of exactly what that Reno tournament is paying. So Roy finally convinces Ish to go on the road to go to this Reno tournament, and from here on out, now it's a road trip movie.
Yeah, so you get which, by the way, road trip movies, how come they never use interstates? They always use the small county highways. That always kind of cracks me up. I guess they're going to a lot of bowling alleys, but the next scene is the first match where they're on the road trying to earn some money to get there, and they see Roy and Ish walking out, and Ishmael kind of walking out like, he loses the match. He's like, that guy was just a little bit better than me. And Roy says, how can you lose to a club player? You're carrying a 260 average. And he's like, well, you guys only did, you guys in your silly 10 frames. And that's kind of the callback to the joke that Mario said around everything the Amish do, they do half again. Like 10 frames, that's for Quakers. So that's the payoff of that joke.
Yeah, so it turns out that Ishmael's perhaps not as good a bowler as Munson has thought he was. That he got his average over 15 frames. So he's only about a 180 bowling average, and now we're screwed. So Roy wants to give up. He's like, screw this, you're not going to win this tournament. So he ditches Ishmael on the side of the road, and he's about to leave. And this is where we get the moment of reckoning for Roy Munson, if he should train this kid and make him a great bowler, or if he should go back to his apartment. And you think maybe it would be his conscience or his honor that makes him make the right choice, but no. What really makes him give Ishmael a second chance is, what is it, Dennis? What is the sight that he sees in his rearview mirror before he goes back to his apartment?
He sees the landlady, I believe, giving, what did you say, the international sign of cunnilingus.
Yes.
The ISC.
Yes, the ISC. Munson is about to go back to his apartment, and he looks up and happens to catch a vision of his landlady doing the it's the grossest thing, and he's like, and he's horrified. So that is his future. If he does not train Ishmael, he will be going back and, sorry to be crude here, he'll be eating out his landlady for the next 6 months, and that's not where you want to be. So he's like, all right, well, I'll give Ish another chance. And this is where I think we hear Munson for the first time, where Ishmael's like, yeah, I was worried I'd get Munson out here in the middle of nowhere.
Right, which gives Roy pause. He's like, what did you say? He's like, Munson, to be up a creek without a paddle, and kind of has that realization again as a callback to the statement by his dad in the beginning of the movie. And Roy tells him, puts on a fake facade and said, you just passed the first test, you're not a quitter, and they go back on the road.
Yeah, and again, I just love that Roy Munson is such a loser that in 17 years his name has become a verb. That everybody apparently in this movie knows this word Munson.
Oh, goodness.
All right, so they go back on the road, and within a couple days, Roy Munson has tainted this pure little Amish boy that now Ishmael is already smoking and drinking, and then later in the movie he'll be smoking a bong, he'll get a tattoo, that he'll be corrupted quite poorly here in the movie. But here's the big test for Ishmael is they're going to go hustle somebody. This is we kind of harken back to earlier in the movie when Ernie said that if a bowler wants to make it, he has to learn to hustle on the road. Where now Roy has become Ernie McCracken, and he tells Ishmael, we got to go hustle people and we got to earn some extra income. And Ishmael is not thrilled with this at all. But Roy says, I'll be the one gambling, I'll be the one putting up all the money. So all you have to do is win these games. Please win these games. So we have a big, long, extended scene. I'm going to kind of go through fast here because I want to get to the end of this movie where they go hustle and they actually win. They go to this bowling alley, and Ishmael's so terrible at playing his character, they don't buy that this is a hustle at all. But they end up hooking him up with some local gambler named Stanley, and Stanley ends up betting them for money, and Ishmael beats him in this hustle game, and this is where we meet Claudia, the other character in this movie.
Right, we meet Claudia, we meet Claudia's nipples, and we meet Randy Quaid's nipples, all in one scene.
Yeah, so that this hustler, Stanley, he's got a girlfriend, Claudia. She's like, the mob girlfriend, and she's kind of smart mouth and sassy. And through this game where they're doing the hustle, the gangster ends up slapping her, and she's mad. And so when Ishmael and Roy get caught hustling, they're about to get stabbed, and Ishmael's about to lose his hand, just like Roy lost his hand. What happens is Claudia, the girlfriend, helps them out because she'd been slapped, and she's not going to take that from her boyfriend. So she ends up escaping with Roy and Ishmael. They flee on the road from this gangster who's trying to kill them. And from here on out, now it's a 3-person road trip movie.
Right, and the next scene is showing them in the diner where basically Roy and Ish are tapped out. Claudia says she has some stake money, so that's why it becomes a threesome. And then you get the scene where you get another Farrelly Brothers staple, athletes in movies, and you get a cameo by Roger Clemens. Yeah,
that's something I'm glad you brought up because I was going to talk about that. Like I said at the start of this podcast, the Farrelly Brothers tend to use a template of movies, how they do movies. They'll just kind of repeat the same formula. And they always use the same type of songs, the same type of road trip movie. And like Dennis said, they always have a professional athlete in one of their movies as a cameo. And I'm not sure if people are aware of this. In Dumb and Dumber, they have Cam Neely, a famous hockey player, as Seabass, the bully. Here in Kingpin, they use Roger Clemens as Skidmark, another bully. In the next one, there's Something About Mary. Obviously, you have Brett Favre, the quarterback. And then I think a lot of people don't remember in the next one, Me, Myself, and Irene, they trot out. Do you remember who they trot out in that one?
I don't.
Anna Kournikova.
Oh, there you go.
Tennis player / jailbait, Anna Kournikova. I guess I have to explain that one. She was a very good-looking tennis player, and she was one of these girls. She was always very famous when she was 17, 18, 19, so it became a running joke if you were allowed to mention that she was good-looking until she turned 18. So yeah, they threw her into a movie, and me, myself, and Irene. So
Yeah, I've seen and read the people who comment on your Facebook post. I don't think you need to explain jailbait. I think your audience is there on that one.
Yeah, but I have to explain.
If they were going to get a Purdue basketball reference, the Indiana crowd, they're going to get jailbait.
But I have to explain who she is.
That's fair.
The jailbait, they know. Yeah, most of my audience has been arrested at some point, I'm pretty sure. So Roger Clemens shows up, and this is the scene where Roy and Claudia kind of team forces, and they decide, we can't do this on our own. She's fleeing from her mob boss, but she's got money. He's got this great plan, and he's got this kid who's a great bowler. So they don't like each other, and they kind of bicker with each other, but they decide they're going to work together in the end and go to this tournament. Although we should talk about the actress that plays Claudia.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't know much about her. I looked up a little bit. I guess she was in Spies Like Us, but I'm not as familiar with her as I am some of the other people in this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think she's the most underrated part of this movie because you always think of like the big name stars, and her name is Vanessa Angel. She's not like a big name comic actress, but I actually think she holds her own pretty well in this movie for someone who doesn't do all that many comedy movies.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, she, like you said before, she's kind of got to, I mean, obviously she has to be the eye candy a bit, but she has to be the, sassy to the mob guy and have a little bit of toughness to her, but then she also has to have a bit of sweetness to her as well and some empathy. And being tough and empathetic at the same time is kind of a tough putt, and I think she does a good job.
And just some of the bickering between her and Woody Harrelson is some of the funniest stuff in this movie, them just going at each other. And again, she holds her own. Like at one point, someone asked to dance with Woody, and Woody's like, no, I can't dance, little lady. And the lady in the bar is like, well, I didn't mean you. I wanted to dance with Ishmael. And Claudia's like, yeah, she said handsome, not handless. Which I always like that line.
Yeah, that's a great line. And then Woody's follow-up is, just because you spend most of your time in the missionary position doesn't mean you're a missionary.
Yes. But again, she does add a little spice to this movie. She's kind of the streetwise character that they need. And from here on out, it's basically another montage coming where they go out and they are just going across the country hustling people.
Yeah, what you get, most of the formula is they're hustling people and they distract the male bowlers by her dressing very scantily, and there's a Marilyn Monroe kind of homage where she's letting the ball or the hand dryer, sorry, not the ball dryer, kind of blow her skirt up a little bit. And the big payoff joke there is she's able to distract all groups of men except for a group of farmers, and they keep bowling well. So Ish is losing until Ish has the idea to bring in a sheep to distract the farmer bowlers, and which is kind of a funny scene.
Yeah, that's one of the more base jokes of the movie here. It
is.
But I do love, this is my favorite montage in the movie, them just swindling all these people for money, and Claudia just always standing next to them in some short skirt, bending over and distracting the other bowlers. But again, she cannot distract the farmers, the hardcore farmers, because they do not find a woman attractive, but they are distracted by a sexy sheep standing there.
And there's another great joke at the end of that montage where a old woman in an electric scooter loses, and then she gets out her coin purse and she's like, sorry, I don't have a lot of money. And they cut to a scene of the car with the scooter bungee to the back. So obviously they just took this poor woman's scooter as payment.
Yes. No scruples on the Claudia, Munson, Ishmael trio that they beat an old handicapped woman in a bowling match and stole her motorized wheelchair. Although I have to say, going back to Vanessa Angel as Claudia, the scene where she cannot distract the farmers, only the sheep distract the farmers, when they cut to her looking all dejected, realizing she was less sexy than a sheep, I just love the look on her face when she's so pissed about that.
Yeah, and Roy has to give her like a little hug to make her like, hey, buck up, kiddo, you're still sexy to us.
Okay, yeah, so all things are going well, and Roy and Claudia are doing well, and then at a certain point in the trip, Roy gets greedy. He's like, I don't like sharing the money with Claudia. So he and Ish decide to sneak out in the middle of a night at a hotel. And Claudia catches them out in the car. And there's a big fist fight, kind of a comic fight between Vanessa Angel and Woody Harrelson, capped by where he starts slugging her boobs.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But anyway, she wins the fight. And in the middle of their fight, they realize, hey, Ishmael fled. So Ishmael is upset that his partners are fighting. And we get this whole little subplot here where he bails on them, and I don't want to waste too much time on this because I want to get to the end of the movie here, but they have to reconcile and go round him up again and get to Reno. It's like a speed bump in the plot here for a couple minutes.
Yeah, which always kind of surprised me because the fight was no more than 3 minutes, and they just say, "Hey, Ish is gone." I'm like, okay, why don't you just look in the immediate area? It's not like he's moving fast, but anyway, apparently he made it very far down the road.
That's a good point. Randy Quaid can run. He runs like Forrest Gump.
There you go.
All right, so here we get a scene, and I mentioned this at the top of the podcast, what I think is maybe the most important scene in the movie, because I think if this scene is not in the movie, the ending doesn't work as well as it does. And this is where Roy and Claudia kind of reconcile, and they realize they can't fight and they can't be greedy, and they're driving around looking for Ishmael, and they happen to go through Roy's old childhood town of Ocelot. And it's very sad. There's if I recall, the music playing here is "This Perfect World" by Freddie Johnston or something like that.
Johnson,
yeah. And so Roy is confronted with his past. Now he's going back to where he was a childhood, bowling legend and prodigy, and he sees the whole town is like all shut down, like all his favorite haunts and childhood places are all torn down, and his dad's old gas station is shut down, and his dad is dead, and it's just kind of this sad, poignant scene where he realizes what a loser he's become in life. And she kind of sees him what he once was, and Claudia and Roy talk, and it's, again, a very nice scene. And again, in a comedy, if you don't have this scene, then the characters aren't very humanized. And that's why this is an important scene to have, that we really start to feel for Roy Munson and all the crap that's been piled on him his entire life, and what a failure he was. And he even admits, he's like, I did nothing. I blew everything. I screwed up my life. And she's like, well, your dad would be proud of you. You're training Ishmael. And Roy's like, no, he wouldn't be proud of me. My dad knows I'm a hack. I'm a failure, and I'm just scamming him. So it's a very sad moment where you actually kind of root for Roy. You kind of feel bad for him for the first time in the movie. And it will become important because he's going to become very prominent to the story in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I think the scene you just talked on right there, basically just that one line where Woody Harrelson's like, nah, he wouldn't be proud, and kind of hangs his head and walks off. I think that, is kind of the 10 seconds that makes that entire scene, which sets up the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and so they finally make up, Roy and Claudia, and Roy's like, I'm going to try to do better. I'm going to try to be a better person, and I hope I don't get Munsoned out here. So they go and they retrieve Ishmael. He's like working in a strip club for some reason.
What's the name of the strip club, by the way?
All right, you tell me. I did not. Is it Bo Peeps? Is that it?
No, it's Stiffies.
Stiffies. What is Bo Peeps from? Why do I know that? Why did I think it was that?
I don't know. I was watching that last night. I'm like, is the name of that really Stiffies? And we go on the IMDb page, and there's Richard Tyson. He plays the owner of Stiffies.
Yes, Richard Tyson. I should point out we did a movie of his on Staff Picks earlier, 3 O'Clock High, where he plays Buddy. What is his last name? The bully. Whatever. But anyway, that's Richard Tyson. Yeah, he shows up here in one of his other movies. Okay, so the three of them are back together, and they make up, and they apologize to Ishmael, and they drive to Reno, and here we go, the wonderful last 20-25 minutes of this movie where they get to Reno, and they're going to go enter the bowling tournament, and Ishmael's going to win this and win the money for his farm, and they're all going to have a happy ending. Although now all of a sudden we get a character from back earlier in the movie who's going to show up here and just steal this movie the last 20-25 minutes. All of a sudden, turns out Big Ernie McCracken, Bill Murray, is here in this Reno tournament, and he's like a big bowling legend now. He's like the king of bowling. Like, all the announcers talk about what a great guy he is. He's amazing. He's like the Cal Ripken Jr. of bowling. Everyone loves him. He's admired. And so Roy Munson is faced with his past, that this is the man that ruined my hand in the ball return. And here we go, the conflict where they meet up at the fateful meeting at the potato bar.
Yeah, and before he gets there, there's someone interviewing him, which I think is such a great Ernie line. They're like, what's the, how can you, or who's your biggest opponent? And he's like, me. If I fall down and, hurt myself, I won't win. And then the reporter goes, well, tell me a little bit about this paternity suit. And he's like, oh, that's hogwash. That's nothing. I pulled out of her way early. And as he's saying that, every woman that walks by, he's like, hey, what's your name? I'm in 1103.
Again, just Bill Murray improvising, just saying. He hasn't played the villain in very many movies. Is there any other movie you can think of where he's the bad guy?
I was thinking about this, and there's a few movies where he starts out the bad guy, like maybe Scrooged or a little bit in Groundhog Day, but then he always has kind of a redemption arc. I don't think there's any movie where he's soup to nuts a bad guy.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I never thought about that. That he plays a good villain and then turns good. But in this one, he's straight villain all the way, and he's so good. Again, one of the best villains in any sports movie ever, Ernie McCracken. Just every line that comes out of his mouth is pure smarm, just pure asshole. And this is where we get he meets up with Roy Munson. They see each other for the first time in 17 years, and they're just staring at each other. And this is the great line where Roy's like, I blame you. You made me hustle. You made me lose my hand. And McCracken's like, I don't remember anybody twisting your arm. And he's like, oh my God, I just said twisting your arm to Munson. Wait till I tell everybody.
The thing that cracks me up about that character is, like you said before, he's such an ass. But the media and everybody love him. And I think it's a good kind of study on how you can have bad behavior, but if you're a good athlete, everybody kind of looks the other way. And what we know now is one of the best case studies for that is Brett Favre, which actually wound up in another Farrelly Brothers movie. So it's like the interesting little full circle there. As you say, they run into each other, and he kind of eggs on Roy, and Ishmael winds up taking a swing at him to defend his buddy and punches a wall with his bowling hand and winds up breaking his hand, which then kind of drives the next part of the movie.
Yeah, so Ishmael breaks his hand, and he's no longer going to be able to bowl. And again, he's the meal ticket. He's the one that Roy has been training. So it looks like they're all screwed, that their money maker has broken his hand. He's not going to be able to bowl. And there's a subplot here, I think, where Claudia, turns out she knew McCracken from many years ago.
You know what? It's like, it's very odd because he says, hey, we had some good times. I remember Chicago, and then kind of goes off, and Roy kind of gives her a disgusted look, but they never really talk about that ever again. It's just like, hey, they used to know each other.
Well, there is the one line, the Bill Murray, that has to be an improvised line where he says, you know, it's a small world when you've got unbelievable tits, Roy.
What's it been, Roy? 1 year for every topping on the bar?
Yes. It is funny how much play this 22-topping potato bar gets in the movie.
And then maybe you can explain this, or maybe if you don't want to dive in this, we don't have to, but to the side of this, we get a nice little Chris Elliott appearance, and you're a comedy guy, and I just always kind of noticed that comedy guys and even comedians just seem to love Chris Elliott.
Yeah, okay, I'll give a quick backstory. Chris Elliott is in this movie. He has a very distinct, memorable scene where he offers to sleep with Randy Quaid for $1 million, which is a parody of a movie that had come out right before this called Indecent Proposal, I believe. Was that the name of it?
It was, starring Woody Harrelson.
Oh, okay, so yeah, so it's a take on that movie, but Chris Elliott is one of those guys that comedians all seem to love, and it's because he's from Late Night with David Letterman. Did you know that?
I did.
Okay. Yeah, he was one of the top writers on Late Night with David Letterman back in the 80s, back in Letterman's peak years, and he came up with a lot of the more bizarre conceptual stuff, so he's kind of a comedian's comedian. Like, my wife cannot stand Chris Elliott. My kids have watched Get a Life, his TV show, and they will not watch one more minute of it. They think it's the worst thing ever, but he's very hit or miss, but very conceptual, kind of like Will Forte or Kyle Mooney, stuff like that. So it's odd to see him here as this a perverted businessman, but yeah, he just shows up here for a second and then he's gone. Although I just noticed today he gets 6th billing in the movie, so good for him.
Yeah, and he's much more prominent in There's Something About Mary. But
yes, Woogie. Okay, so Ishmael is unavailable for the bowling tournament, and it looks like all is lost, but Ishmael comes up with a solution. He's like, well, you know, I can't bowl, but there's someone else in this room who can. And Munson's like, are you crazy? I can't bowl. Like, I have a rubber hand. I haven't bowled in 17 years. And Ish is like, well, you were a champion once. You can do it again. I guess if you get through the first couple rounds, I bet you can get your rhythm back. So this is how it's going to go, that Roy Munson himself, the man-child, is going to come back here and make his triumphant return to a bowling tournament against Bigger and McCracken in the Reno $1 million Invitational. And that will be the last 15 minutes of this movie, the big tournament.
And again, one of my favorite scenes of the movie, which I put in the comments when you're talking about before, is that he goes to sign up and there's a entry desk, and apparently anyone can just sign up for the Reno Open. So he says his name, Roy Munson, and the ladies laugh because, you know, again, Munson's been turned into a verb. They don't actually think it's the Roy Munson. They said, are you an amateur or a professional? He says, professional. And they pull out this card and they're like, oh, you know, your dues are in arrears. And they do like this, you know, 10-second, all this calculations, blah, blah, blah. And apparently 17 years of fees plus interest and penalties winds up being like $35.
Yeah.
or $38. And one thing we kind of glossed over was before we get to the tournament, Claudia disappears with all the money that they built during the road trip. So they don't have $38. But then Roy remembers he still has this ring on. So he puts the ring in front of the face of the people doing registration and says, well, maybe you can hold on to this. And the woman says, what am I going to do with a rubber hand?
Yeah. Again, just the running joke in the movie. Every time he's showing the ring, they notice the hand.
And he's like, no, the ring. And they go, okay, we'll put you in the tournament. They never explain, though. It's winner take all, and he loses. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert.
Oh, so maybe he doesn't get the ring back. She keeps it.
Yeah, but I think he does have it back.
So you found you planned a plot hole.
Yeah, so anyway, maybe they decided to give it back to him to be nice. Who knows? But anyway, so he gets himself entered into the tournament, and away we go.
Yeah, just the one line in there that always makes me laugh. They're like, name? He's like, Munson, Roy E. And they just giggle. They're like, no, seriously. No, that's my name. I'm Roy Munson. So he gets in the tournament, he enters, and there's a great scene of his first day in the tournament as a first day back on the Pro Tour in 17 years where we have a flashback to him walking into Disco Inferno, just like the start of the movie. And he reaches and grabs a guy's piece of pizza, and the guy's like, fuck you, and like shoves him. So, just a nice little callback reference there.
Yeah, and that's funny. I mean, the whole tournament, it's legitimately montage, cutscene, montage, cutscene, montage. I didn't realize that till I rewatched it, but it starts off with a fun little sight gag where all the bowlers have one initial ball to start it off, and as he bowls, his hand comes off. And as he's waiting for the ball return, he looks at the other bowler and says, you wouldn't happen to have a Phillips head screwdriver, would you?
Yes.
And the guy just kind of looks at him like, no. And then the ball comes out and it has the hand still stuck to it, and he goes, that's mine.
Yeah. Yeah, so like you said, here we go, the montage. This is, I think, 3 of them in a row here. The first one is set to She Came On, and it's just the first round of the tournament, and it's just amazing shots of just all these bowlers bowling, and it's very exciting, and you see Woody Harrelson bowling and Bill Murray bowling, and apparently, I think I read this in the trivia, that Woody Harrelson was a terrible bowler in real life.
Yeah.
They said, like, for all these months of practicing and filming, he never got any better, and it was astounding.
Yeah, my personal opinion on that is he probably just doesn't eat enough meat to be a good bowler.
But he's a good basketball player. If you know the backstory on White Man Can't Jump, he was like fantastic in that movie. He just can't bowl. And then Bill Murray apparently is a fantastic bowler. Like, I'll talk about this when we get to the end, but he was like, he could have made it maybe as a pro bowler. He's really good in real life.
Yeah, I mean, he was good at baseball and a good golfer too, right?
Yeah.
I've kind of noticed that good golfers are good bowlers. There just must be something about muscle memory.
Okay, yeah, so we get this tournament, I think, 64 people bowling, and they're all, you just see shot after shot of people getting strikes and stuff, and the field's getting narrowed down, and there's this wonderful shot, one of my favorite little visual shots of this movie of Big Ern kind of sitting in the foreground. He's kind of lounging, and you see behind him Roy Munson just glaring at him, like, I'm coming for you, McCracken. And I should point out McCracken's ball, Big Ern's ball. One of my favorite little sight gags in this movie. It's like a see-through ball with a rose in the middle. And he calls it Sweetness at one point.
Come on, Sweetness. One more time.
Yeah.
And then the first kind of cutscene in between the montages is the great where, hey, we've got the Cinderella story out of nowhere, Roy Munson. What have you been doing for 17 years? And he's like, well, there was the 80s and, mainly drinking.
Yeah.
The guy, are you still drinking now? Like, no. Are you buying? Cracks me up.
Yeah, so we get montage after montage of this bowling tournament, and we get down to the final match, which, predictably is Big Ern against Roy Munson, and they even say that Munson is like the Cinderella story of this tournament. He came out of nowhere. Like, this guy was big amateur talent in 1979, and now we're in 96, and he shows up in his first tournament. They're like, who is this guy? And he's like, apparently the big crowd favorite, and he's got a nickname. They call him the Rubber Man because he's got the rubber hand. So we get this big build-up to the championship match of this big underdog story, Roy Munson, against the greatest gladiator legend of all time, Big Ern, Ernie McCracken. And the announcers here are just going so over the top. I'm trying to remember, what do they say? I have it written down here. They said, this guy, such a nice guy, Ernie McCracken. He's going to win a lot of political office one day. And at one point, in the championship match, they have this woman runs out and kisses Roy Munson, and that's people may not know this now. That's Morgana, the kissing bandit. She was
Right.
famous in the 80s. She would run onto baseball fields and kiss people and get arrested. And she was this huge, big-breasted woman. It was kind of a thing. So they give her a cameo in this movie. She runs out and kisses Munson, and then Big Ern, of course, takes her hand gallantly and kisses it like a knight. And the announcer's like, "How gallant is that? Oh, this man is going to be such a great politician one day." And as they're saying that, he cops a feel. You can see as he's shoving her aside. How gallant.
Yeah, it just gets back to the whole bigger and had everyone snowed over. We didn't even talk about the United Fund.
Yeah, there is the commercial right at the start of the tournament for the United Fund, which talks about what a great role model Ernie McCracken is and what a great humanitarian he is, how he sponsors a different child in every town that the bowling tournament goes to. And if you watch the commercial, it's really just him hitting on their hot moms in every scene. So, like, every town he's got some hot mom he's banging, and he passes off as he's sponsoring their kid.
The kid's like, sometimes Mr. McCracken's there in the morning before I wake up.
Yeah.
And then I love at the end where, he's got all the moms and, he's basically got one hand, basically down this woman's skirt. And he's like, I don't want to see these kids get Munsoned out there without a father.
Yeah, so this tension between Big Ern and the rubber man, Roy Munson, is just palpable at this point. And so we get to the final match, and it's just fantastic. This whole, like, every shot in this last tournament I love. Even my wife was watching it today, and she doesn't even really like this movie, but she'll watch this last tournament because she thinks it's so funny, where they play Showdown by ELO is the music that they play. Mm-hmm. And it's, just Big Ern and Roy Munson matching each other, strike for strike. And we get to the end of the game. What is it? It's like Munson's up by like nine pins or something. And then he gets a split, like earlier in the movie, the 7-10 split. And he somehow picks it up. It's like this big moment. Again, it's kind of cliched. Any bowling movie will have a 7-10 split at some point. Munson picks it up, and basically Roy Munson is winning this tournament, and he's ahead by 29 pins going into the last frame, where basically for Ernie McCracken to win this tournament, he gets 3 balls left, and he has to get a strike on every one of them, and he'll win by 1 pin. And this is one of the great all-time real-life movie moments here, where Bill Murray is going to do something pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, so he needs the turkey. And from everything that I've read, the directors thought that, hey, it's probably going to take him, 8 to 10 balls to bowl 3 strikes. But they were very clear with the crowd. Hey, after the first one, cheer. After the second one, cheer louder. And after the third one, sort of erupt. And it turns out that Bill Murray just walked up and bowled 3 strikes on the first 3 balls. And so the crowd reaction you see in there is just a legitimate, holy shit, this guy really just did that.
Yeah.
And that's why it was so loud and enthusiastic.
Yeah, anytime you watch this scene, watch those last 3 strikes, because Bill Murray legitimately did that on his first 3 tries. And when you see the crowd go insane, they literally just did that. That's their natural reaction to the legend of Bill Murray, not only improvising every bit of dialogue in this movie, stealing every scene, but pulling off 3 strikes in a row when he needed to, and it's just amazing.
And then you get the great, after he bowls the 3rd strike, he starts laying down on the lanes and just spinning in circles. And then he gets up and he shakes Roy's hand and pulls out his rubber hand and throws it into the crowd. When you hear the announcer say, "Ooh, some lucky fan is going to get a souvenir."
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I love about the ending, that not only does the hero of this movie, Munson, fail, he loses at the end. You think he's going to win, but Big Ern steals his thunder yet again. Then Roy is humiliated when his rubber hand is thrown into the crowd as a souvenir.
And of course the announcers don't feel bad for Roy. They think it's a great act by Ern.
What a great politician.
You get this scene of where all the people are around Big Ern, and Bill Murray's just ad-libbing. He's saying things like, "I can finally buy my way out of anything. Big Ern's above the law." And someone said, "Did you feel any pressure?" And he goes, "Yeah, there was pressure. I didn't want to lose to a guy that had a hook for a hand."
Although we did neglect to mention all throughout the final tournament Bill Murray's comb-over.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's, like I said, that's why my wife watches the last scene. All throughout this final tournament, Bill Murray's got the king of all comb-overs, where at the start of the match, it's kind of combed over like a bald guy would just drape his hair over his head. But as the tournament goes on and on, it's like flung off to the side like a hand almost. It's just this crazy hairpiece as Bill Murray's going through this tournament.
And after he bowls his second strike, he gives like this weird, like, I think he's trying to be Hulk Hogan, flexing his muscles, but he's like really like older and stiff. And so it's like this weird, like, flex going on
Yeah.
in between as the hair's spiking up.
So basically like Hulk Hogan now.
There you go. Hogan's above the law, too. He got all that Gawker money.
Okay, so the end of the movie, Munson has failed, and Big Earn wins again, and Big Earn is carried off with his $1 million prize, and Bill Murray saves the day. He's going to go win a lot of political office now. How gallant. And so there actually is a happy ending to this movie. You kind of forget about this part where it turns out that Roy Munson, even though he lost the tournament, he gained some valuable insight about what it's like to be a mature adult. And he's somehow rewarded by the fact that Trojan Condoms wants to make him their spokesman because he's known as the Rubber Man. So he gets like a $500,000 check, and he goes and saves Ishmael's farm. He goes and pays them off, and he and Claudia make up. And it turns out that Claudia stole all the money from the gangster. The gangster had bet for Big Earn to win the tournament, so she doubled their money. And they make up, and they go out to the farm to tell Ishmael that they're going to save his farm and pay it off. And we get a great ending here where they're at the farm, and the Ishmael's parents are like, yes, Ishmael, they told us all about all the boozing you did out there, and the whoring, and the running around, and Ishmael's hanging his head, and the dad's like, and then Brother Munson told us how you stopped him from doing that, how you changed his life, how you read scripture, and how you talked him into changing your life and turning his life around. And Ishmael's like, really? We did that? Okay. And then, and the great line here is where the dad's like, you got Roy to stop being such a bad influence, and you stopped Claudia from being such a whore like she is.
You got Miss Claudia to quit being such the whore. It just cracks me up. And then you get the famous, end scene where Roy and Claudia are, well, first they're getting ready to get into the car, and Roy tries to have this sweet moment with Ish where he's like, hey, all that, faith stuff. You thought you were, really talking about you. You're really talking about me. And he's trying to have something land kind of deep. And Ish kind of looks at him. He's like, I lost you. I don't really know what you're talking about here. So he gets in the car, and Roy and Claudia take off, and you get a whole group of Amish people on the hill say, bye, Roy. Bye, whore.
Yes. Bye, Brother Munson, bye, whore. Those are the last two lines of the movie as Roy and Claudia drive off in the sunset, and they're apparently a couple now and friends, and that is the end of the movie, the heartwarming Kingpin. I believe Dennis and I would both argue the Farrelly Brothers masterpiece that never got the attention that it deserved at the time, but it's so heartening to see how many people love it now.
Very much so. Like I say, when I went through this, I was amazed at how many of these lines I still quote today, and how much I really remembered having to watch it again. Just a great movie.
Yeah, just everybody firing at the top of their game. Farrelly Brothers absolutely just throwing out these scenes and these lines that were all great. You had Bill Murray, again, I'd argue the greatest Bill Murray performance, and that's something when he's maybe the greatest comic actor ever. You got Woody Harrelson, one of the most underrated comic actors ever. You have these great characters. You got Lynn Shay as the gross landlady. You got this fantastic soundtrack. Just everything about this movie worked so well for what it's trying to do. And again, it's just a shame that the Farrelly Brothers to this day, I think, still are kind of embarrassed about it, saying that it was a flop. And I think it's bad that they shouldn't be embarrassed, because this is, I would be so proud if I had a movie like this on my resume.
Oh, without a doubt. And even beyond everything you just said, just well written in terms of the story arcs, even the, still very joke dense. A lot of the jokes connect from the, beginning of the movie back to the end of the movie. And yeah, that's all I got to say about that, I guess.
Excellent. So let's see, is there anything else you want to say? We're about at the hour and a half mark, and I got to trim this down pretty good now. But is anything else you want to say about the travails of Roy Munson, the Irish Amish guy, or Ernie McCracken, or Claudia? Anything else you need to add before we sign off here?
I think that's about all. Like I say, I could probably go through and, do a laundry list of the some of the other running gags, but we would be here for another about 2.5 hours. Even though the one thing that I really like is the scene where he's flossing. It's not necessarily because he's flossing. It's because he asks, what are you doing? He's like, flossing. He's like, I always thought your name was Munson. And that's kind of another running gag that shows up every once in a while. So I thought that was pretty funny as well.
Yeah, again, we skipped over probably about 20 great gags and jokes in this movie just in the interest of time. So Again, I just want to thank you for coming by, Dennis. That was a lot of fun. Again, my throat's sore from laughing so much at this one, so that's always a good sign. I think if we have fun, that hopefully people will have fun listening to this. And this is one of those movies I just really hope more people out there appreciate. Again, Caddyshack always gets referenced as this great seminal comedy of the early '80s, and then like Stripes and Ghostbusters. And once you get to the '90s, you have There's Something About Mary and all the big ones. But I think Kingpin should be right on that list. This is, I think, one of the greatest comedies of all time, and I will hear no opinions other than that.
Very cool. Appreciate you having me on. That was fun.
And again, my name is Mario Lanza, and this is Staff Picks. If you want to reach me, if you have any feedback, if you have any movies you think I should talk about, you can reach me at staffpickspodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach me on Twitter at Mario J. Lanza. And until the next time I talk to you guys, I will be out there looking for more underrated, underloved, or underappreciated movies that just need a little more attention. And until next time, bye, Brother Goodman.
Bye, whore.
Hi, what's your name?
Munson, Roy E.
Seriously.